Hello, everyone, and welcome to this exciting session today. We have with us none other than Mr. Kiran Karnik, who describes himself as a public unintellectual. And we are also going to be talking about his latest book, Evolution Decoding India's Disruptive Tech Story. Welcome to the session, Mr. Karnik.
Thank you.
Straight off the bat, you've obviously spent a lot of time in deep tech, both at ISRO and then your time at NASSCOM. You've been at the forefront of some of the major technological advancements in India, and have been watching the technological space for many decades in India and abroad. And in your experience, where do you see mankind and India specifically in this whole evolution of technology and how it can impact us as humanity, both on the health side or culture, so on and so forth?
Well, let me take the first one, Kumar, the thing about how it's going to affect us in totality, humanity as a whole. And what's happening is quite amazing and interesting. Just look at one of the prospects, all the new developments in the area of electronics and healthcare, where you're beginning to replace parts just as you do for a car. You take off something that's not working and put in a new part. That's beginning to happen to the human body. Some of them we don't even think of. You put in a pacemaker for your heart and it supplements whatever your heart is doing. You put in a hearing aid, it supplements your hearing. And things like laser correction on eyes is common. You put in something that's not there. So as you begin to replace these parts that get worn out, you're going to have the prospect of being able to live forever. You might say immortality is almost around the corner. Now, that raises tremendously interesting and somewhat perplexing issues. Is that good or bad? Do you want to live forever? I don't. I don't know about everybody else. I don't know whether it's such a good idea to be living forever. Even before that, do you want a memory that forgets nothing? And again, it sounds great that you have perfect memory, you remember everything that ever happened. But I mean, think about it for a while and say, my God, there are many things you want to forget. There are many things you want others to forget. You don't want them to remember everything. So some of these new developments which are coming up are in the realm of both ethics and sociology. Suppose everybody lives forever. What about population? What about young children? What about aging people? What are you going to do? So you're going to have a lot of issues that are relevant to both sociology and ethics. And I think this is something that the human species as a whole has to consider where we are going and what do we want to do.
Your point on immortality is very interesting. Is it an era where we can say that if you have the means and the resources, then you will have, in Sanskrit, probably the term I think is ichha mrityu. So death at your desire, at your time, at your wish. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, absolutely, Kumar. I see that as around the corner because, as I said, there would be many people like me who don't want to live forever. And so, as long as you live, you want a strong and healthy life, which is the great thing about the new technologies. It will enable you to live your life to the fullest. But you want to live only for a certain period. And at some point of time, like euthanasia, you might want to decide this is it. And, it's great to think of it like the digital world. One day you're hale, hearty, mentally, physically doing great. And the next day you decide, I don't want to exist any longer. Of course, there's a different question. What does not existing mean? You just sort of put off all the switches in the electronics in your body, or what do you do? But yes, I think that's going to happen. So you're right, that concept is very much there about wanting to end stuff. But you made another point in passing, Kumar, which I do want to touch on, and this is troubling too. Before we get to that perfect state where everybody will be able to enjoy the best of health and live as long as they want in great shape, and then decide when they don't want to live. Before that, you'll have a period when these new procedures and the new ways of living a healthy, full life and getting everything replaced is going to be available, but going to be available to a few because it's going to be expensive. And so you're going to create a new division in society where some people, the rich basically, can manage a healthy, full, strong life, and others will be left behind. So, in some sense, you're beginning to increase the class divide in the society. And then take that a step further, with things like brain implants, you can improve both your memory, your capacity of processing in the brain. You can think faster, quicker, maybe smarter. And so you'll get the rich able to do this, and the rich will get smarter and therefore richer. So, in fact, you'll create an even wider disparity between those who are well off and can afford these new additions to their brain power and those who can't. And then the final step, which is already beginning to happen, you'll have designer babies where you can design your babies not just color, size and shape of nose and color of hair and eyes, but to bring in special intelligence which is implanted in them. And so you have a sort of caste system, not just from birth, but pre-birth. And some of these are troubling and worrisome. I'm confident, I'm an optimist. I think our social systems will take care of them. There will be ethics that develops. But you always have some rogue elements that begin to do something that's different. And this would be troublesome of what you need to do to take care of these things.
That's a very interesting point you made. So, in a sense, technology in many ways in recent years has been a big enabler for populations worldwide across stratas of society. Take for example the mobile phone or the internet. And on this hand, technology, like you said, might be available to a very select few, and it can also become like an unfair advantage. So, for example, like you mentioned, technology for making people smarter, for improving their brains or improving their memory or sleep or making them sharper. So it's almost like an unfair advantage, only available to those who can pay for it.
Quite true. This is exactly what one worries about, that you might have a situation where technology becomes another way of differentiating not just those who know and those who don't, but those who are better off and those who aren't. So you begin to get these divides, and we've seen these things create their own problems. And as we have progressed, if you look at a long-term view of history and take a period of a few thousand years, you will see that we have made tremendous progress in all areas of technology, of science, things of people fighting each other, of countries going to war, of people within a country fighting each other for some reason or the other, have not gone away even now. So while technology develops at a faster pace, our ability to handle the new things that happen in society, and sometimes amplified, not sometimes, but very often amplified by technology, become more difficult. I mean, take another example, look at the new emerging areas of, say, social media. Uh, Potentially, this can be a fabulous thing for people to get to know each other. You build your own groups, you're able to communicate quicker and faster, and do a lot of things that sound very exciting. But we're already seeing that, in fact, social media is creating new divides. There's hate mail going around, there's trolling, there are echo chambers where the view which you already have of some person or some group, a stereotype gets built even further. And then you get other kinds of problems as some of these things go viral. And we have things which are troubling, mob violence, lynchings. So I'm not sure how technology amplifies some of these tendencies in society, but it does. And that is something that's going to be very troubling as we go ahead and look at the technology, society, interconnection, and interaction.
Right. What about looking at your chapter, which is around attitudes, behavior, culture, and technology? Uh, that sounds very, very interesting because clearly, especially in India and actually even worldwide, how digital media, social media are just very recent examples of how technology have shaped people's attitudes, behavior, and culture. And those in turn are also shaping the advent of new technology and we'd love to hear about your views on where you see this going.
Well, it is a mutually interactive thing, and technology is shaping a great deal of society. We were talking of it earlier, and you can see it even now in the ways, some of which you mentioned, how the new technologies, be it social media, be it the internet, are building completely new kinds of social attitudes and behavior. One thing which we see, which is something all of us bemoan but do pretty much little about, that you hardly know your neighbor, but you know very well somebody who's a few thousand kilometers away, thanks to new communication technology. So, people have gone away, stay in close touch, or people like you from your peer group, you're in touch with them even if they're very far away. And your next door neighbor, who in fact may have things in common with you, is not so well known to you as a friend. And in some sense, I would say that geography, as the old saying goes, geography is dead, and being near or far has no meaning any longer. And that's one thing that's affecting many of our attitudes and behavior. You can see how it's affected culture in a big way, because today much of culture is transnational. And probably, very frankly, you and I and people like us may be more comfortable with somebody who's thousands of kilometers away than somebody who's living next door in a very different kind of socioeconomic class and can't share the same conversations or the same experiential background that you had, and therefore is more distant. So these are creating new changes in what I call ABC, the attitude, behavior, and culture. The interesting part is that it's not just technology shaping this, and I love to give an example from my very much younger days of how culture, in fact, shapes technology, how technology gets used in a different way. And this is from my days in Ahmedabad. And this was many decades ago when the first drive-in theater there, the first one in the country actually came up in Ahmedabad. And elsewhere, I had been abroad and seen the drive-in theaters, say in the US, where they were full of cars and it looked like a ghostly parking lot, because in each car, there were, as you know and can imagine, just two people typically. And the windows were all rolled up. The speaker was inside. They were watching the movie, enjoying a movie along with a few hours of privacy, where they could be by themselves, a young couple typically. The drive-in came to Ahmedabad, and it was unbelievable. This expectation was exactly the opposite. People would come with cars packed with 7, 8, 9 people, people of all age groups. They'd bring out their durries, they'd bring out their tiffin carriers, take everything out of the car, and everybody was outside the car. Nobody was inside the car. It was a huge picnic. I know this technology in quotes of drive-in was completely transformed by the social ethos of the place, which was one of group outings, of close family, of enjoying something outdoor, enjoying your little snack along with whatever else you're doing. So it became a complete picnic. And I just love to see that example of the transformation. When the drive-in opened, my expectation was like the US, it'll be a parking lot with, you see nobody outside the cars. And here was completely the opposite. So just one sort of simplistic but extreme example of how our attitudes and behavior affect the way we use technology. So I think there are ways where each one influences that. There are much more serious ways in which our behavior or our attitudes shape how technology begins to get used in what forms and how. But there are many, many cases you can think of, and I can think of examples where, in fact, our social elements have shaped how technology gets used, just as much as technology is certainly, without a doubt, shaping all our attitudes and behavior today.
That's very interesting. And which brings me to my next question around your chapter called Google's Clinic. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around how artificial intelligence and other technologies will change healthcare, and companies like Google are going to play a big role in it. So please tell us about your views on where you see this going, and also a follow-on question is, there's always been a lot of skepticism about AI, and especially AI as it relates to healthcare. So what are your views on both of these?
Well, Kumar, just a word first on the chapter title. It says Dr. Google's Clinic, and I must spend half a minute to tell you where that came from. One day when I was going to my doctor, he seemed very upset with me, and he says, you people are creating a lot of problems. People like you I said, hey, doc, what did I do? Yeah, I've come here to get treated, not to get a lecture. He said, no, you are in IT. Today, every patient I get comes here, and the minute I begin to examine and telling what it is, he asks me all kinds of questions about the latest research, but the medicine you're prescribing has this side effect, and what you're diagnosing, I'm not sure whether it is this or that. And he said, when I ask people, they all tell me, I looked up on Google, I looked up what I have, and hey, it's different from what you're saying. So he says, I got so fed up, I told them, why don't you go to Dr. Google instead of coming to Dr. Me? So that's where the Dr. Google's clinic idea came from, that this is what many people do today. Any of us, we look at our symptoms, go to Google, put in the symptoms. But more importantly, I think people are beginning to use these new tools very effectively, both on the medical side and the patient side, where they're able to link up with each other. Remote medicine now, so-called telemedicine, has become more common. The doctor is somewhere else, you are somewhere else. And today, it's not just a matter of speaking. You can, in fact, send all your stuff digitally to them, anything from an MRI to an X-ray. There are simple devices that monitor your blood pressure or blood sugar, which you can transmit to the doctor who's somewhere else. And that somewhere else could be just, 2 kilometers away, or it could be, 2,000 kilometers away. So I think that is happening. Specifically on the newer areas in artificial intelligence, a lot of tremendously exciting things, because many of the things that we get afflicted with tend to be personal and individualized. And particularly in areas like oncology, say cancer treatment, it's not a one size fits all. The treatment has to be very specific to the type of problem and the individual. And today, with artificial intelligence, the doctors are able to get data sets from hospitals all over, put together the symptoms, analyze them using artificial intelligence, and use machine learning then to try and match what kind of treatment would be appropriate for what person. And some of these are very, very exciting. Take another example, your brain waves, so to say, and what they do and how they affect you. Now, measurements of these are beginning to be used from the brain wave, the EEG, so to say, the electroencephalogram, to be able to both diagnose and possibly treat people. Now, earlier you would think of stimuli that were also electrical impulses, but today there are lots of people who are now picking these up and suggesting behavioral or other changes to make these corrections, including auto feedback. So you do something that improves your own system. And you know more about this area than I do, Kumar, but that's another element of it. But many exciting things are happening using the new technologies, be it data analytics or artificial intelligence. Some people worry about this, saying, this is a lot of data coming from there. What about measurements of my own, blood sample or whatever else? But you're beginning to see that with large amounts of data that you can get and analyze, you're able to make far better refinements and diagnosis. Just one final example, again, talking of oncology and cancer, IBM has done this work, and they've shown that purely by artificial intelligence and machine, they're able to get to a diagnosis level which is comparable, sometimes frankly better than what many doctors do. Now, this is not a threat to a doctor, it's a supplement to what doctors do. And then, of course, you have modern surgery where robotics are used, which are very precise. I mean, you don't have to worry about the surgeon's hand being a steady hand. You're able to get in precision. You're able to image internal organs in 3 dimensions and get, really perfect sort of images to know where you need to do something or not. So these tools have become very powerful, and I think they're transforming healthcare in a way which we just can't imagine.
Right. You touched upon something very important, as to how some of the earlier tech was probably more invasive, right? Uh, like the example you mentioned about, giving electrical treatment to people for mental health disorders or for the brain, so on and so forth. And there's so much of new tech which is non-invasive and not just more convenient, but also more effective. And do you think we have enough examples of these becoming prevalent, or other good examples of tech in healthcare or tech for health, which will tide over this initial skepticism that I think people, especially in countries like India, still have towards using technology for health? I mean,
Well,
so that this moniker of Dr. Google's clinic is not just a moniker; it actually becomes a reality.
yes. Well, you're beginning to see examples of that, Kumar, and you're right. The Dr. Google Clinic becoming reality is already there in some of the simpler forms. I mean, take one example where you're looking at your exercise regimen and what you need to do to keep your body weight, your sugar level under control. And today you wear something around your wrist, and that gives you a lot of data which is transmitted to your cell phone, which can then be transmitted somewhere else and analyzed and sent back to you. Today, some of it is with human intervention, but there are elements which are without human intervention. So your data about everything from your pulse rate to how many steps you walk to how many calories you ate are all fed into some central system which analyzes it and sends you back what you should be doing and how you should take care of some of the elements. Have you overeaten? You need to reduce your calorie and improves your protein. Whatever, it tells you how much more you need to walk and how you're doing on how your blood sugar is holding up, your heart rate is where, and all these are today automated. And these have become more commonplace thanks to the simplicity of the user interface, which is a key element. The user should feel comfortable and not feel this some new burden or stuff put into his body. So these are all non-invasive ways of collecting data from your bodily functions, transmitting them somewhere, having them analyzed in a way which is professional and based on large amounts of other data, and telling you then what you should do and what you might do. And I do think that this is going to grow, and you're going to find more and more of this happening. And the comfort level of people, you're absolutely right, people are a little uneasy. I mean, it's the old story of the, poor illiterate person being taken for a ride by a doctor who just says, here's an injection and gives them a distributed stuff or whatever, or gives them a placebo and say, have this every 3 hours and you'll be better. And the guy does get better. So some of it is, that kind of thing of doctors doing stuff or not doing things, because a lot of it, frankly, and we know more and more of this now, is related to how your body begins to self-correct and take things. And if you get the right feedback and take sometimes the right action, but just sometimes the right feedback, you're able to do a lot more. So I do see technology playing a big role in this, and also the acceptance of that technology initially is slow, but is growing quite fast with the newer uses, which is simple. You can try out yourself, you try it out and you feel satisfied, and you say, hey, this works. And so you will get more of that happening in future.
Great. Those are some amazing views, Mr. Karnik. And as we get this session to an end, just wanted to ask a final question. You're one of those very few individuals in the world, I would say, who've got a deep understanding of technology ground up because of the work you've done. And also, you're an evangelist of technology over the last many decades. So you're possibly best positioned to give our viewers a quick sort of parting one-liner on where you see technology taking us, technology taking mankind in the future.
Well, just maybe 2-3 lines, Kumar.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think many people think that technology is the new hidden hand shaping our future, the hand of God, as somebody said, from a different context elsewhere, which many of my football friends would recognize. But no, I do think that while technology is shaping where we are going, it is for us to control and guide that technology. And therefore, my closing line would be, you referred to me as a technology evangelist, and thank you for that compliment, but I'm not sure it's a compliment because frankly, I don't want to be selling technology. I think we have to be careful about technology. And more importantly, we have to guide and direct it. And I think that would be my parting line, that technology does great and wonderful things. It's for us to shape and direct it in ways which are in the common interest of all of us. And today, more and more examples tell us that its common interest is a common interest of humanity, not of one group, one community, one country. And the most visible examples of that are climate change. It's not what we do or what China does or what the US does. If we all don't do something, the earth as a whole is going to warm up and we're going to be in deep trouble. All of us, doesn't matter where you live, rich country, rich person, poor person. And therefore, there's something that we have to do together. So I think that would be my parting message, if we say at all, that let's take charge of technology and put it to good use for collective benefit.
Thank you so much for joining us in this session. And I could just go on and on. I think you've got some amazing insights and anecdotes, both from your personal time in the tech space, and I'm sure readers of this book would learn a lot, not just about how technology has been shaped in the last few decades, but also about where technology is going to take mankind in the future, in healthcare, in culture, on climate change, so on and so forth. So good luck with your book, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kumar. Enjoyed the conversation.